Hey friends, fantastic topic today with a fantastic person. Joanne's story is amazing. There's a wild ride up and down throughout her story. She's a impressive entrepreneur, has so many twists and turns to her story that um, I knew it beforehand, but those of you who don't know it are going to be on the edge of your seat as she goes from one venture to the next and one life experience to the following. So enjoy what you got here. And friends, if you haven't liked and subscribed on YouTube, please do that. That means so much to us. Share the podcast with people who you think might find value in it. We work really hard on this, so every additional view, like, and subscriber really does mean a lot to us. And on your favorite podcasting application, your Spotify, Apple, Audible, so on, please give us a 5-star, leave comments on the episode, do anything that you can, because it does make an impact, not only on the algorithm, but us. As creators, we like to know what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, or if you ever want to hear more from a guest or less from a guest or a different type of guest. So thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy this one. Joanne, how are you?
Hey, I'm great.
I appreciate you coming on. I'm a mutual friend with your sister, and she had been telling me, I got this awesome guest for you. You have to connect with her. It just so happens to be my sister, but I got a great guest. And I'm like, great, let's get her in. So I'm super excited to do this. And she's sung your praise and said that your story is amazing. So I'm really happy to be here and help you tell it. But why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're currently doing and up to?
Okay, great. I hope I live up to the hype. So, first of all, so I am a serial entrepreneur. I'm a person who's curious, I'm adventurous. I am fearless. I am responsible. And I like to start out when I tell people about me, a few things that make me who I am, because those are the things that allow me to become successful in the things that I do. Because those things don't define me. Those things are just things that I do. But what defines me is um, is my attributes. Is that how you say that? Attributes?
Yeah.
My attributes. So I really do like to let people know, like, that's where I come from. And because of that, I'm able to be a restaurant owner, a mental health advocate, a leader in the sober community. Like, because of those things about me, they allow me to be the things that I do.
Do you think you've always had those characteristics? You said curious, adventurous, fearless, and responsible. Or do you think that those have been things that you've grown into?
Actually had that conversation with myself the other day because I'm single and I'm alone a lot. So I'm an extroverted introvert, and so I do need my downtime. And so I always wonder, like, how did I become like where I'm at today? Because honestly, I did not have role models at all.
Mm,
My family was very chaotic. They were very disconnected. They weren't very loving. There was a lot of chaos, and there definitely was nobody in my family that, like, I think me and my sisters are the first generation to get formally educated. Like, nobody had been to college. The women all stayed at home. The men worked. My dad, he was a bus driver. He was just a regular dude. My aunts and uncles, like, it was just very traditional. We're Puerto Rican, so we grew up
mm,
in New York, and then we came to Texas for Jesus because my mom said that Jesus was in Texas, and this is a true story. That
mm.
she got saved during the '70s movement, and then one day she just comes home and she's like, "Hey, we're leaving New York, and we're going to Texas."
Did
Like,
you ever drill down on why she thought Jesus was in Texas?
yeah, because she heard that there was like a revolution of Jesus in Texas. Like, my
Mm,
uncle, my uncle had met this girl from Texas, and her dad was a preacher. And so when we got here to Texas, we moved to, like, what I would call today a compound. It was
mm,
land, and there was many, like, houses on this land, and people lived there and they went to church there, and it was very religious, not spiritual. It was very religious. And so that's why, like here I was, 12 years old, living in New York, living the dream as far as I was concerned, kind of, sort of. I mean, our family was super crazy. There's like lots of mental health issues way, way, way back ancestral. So I moved to Texas, and I've been through a lot of therapy, and I always call myself like the 12-year-old little girl, because I feel like that's when my life, I don't remember that much about my life before 12, like not really like a lot of specific stuff. And 12 is like the defining moment for me. Was my parents like ripped us out of New York overnight to move to Texas, to a different place, and for Jesus.
Well, yeah, that's got to be a culture shock, because New York, you're living in the hustle and bustle, and
Mhm.
you have Puerto Rican friends and family. Maybe you're even like in that culture. I was just in Puerto Rico like 4 weeks ago,
Oh,
and, and then you go to Texas, and what kind of sounds like a religious. It's not cult. It doesn't sound cult like, but I did have a woman on my podcast who had a very similar story. She was in
mhm.
California. And it was like, yeah, we all lived together. We were like, we did church every single day together.
Mhm.
Only
Mhm.
like met and interacted with people within the church. I'm not saying that was your story, but that's
No, that was my story.
quite
That
a
was my
large
story.
that's a
That was
large
my story.
dichotomy from
Yeah.
New York City. You
Yeah.
didn't
It was
say city, but
well, we lived in Brooklyn, and so
yeah.
I'm the oldest of six children, and so I was able to pretty much do, like, my parents, like, I also grew up in a time when you could run the streets, and
Ye-
it
Yeah.
wasn't it wasn't bad for you to run the streets. And I don't care what anybody says, it's not even bad for you to run the streets today. Like in Texas, for sure, it's not bad. Like the kids should be on the street if they want to be on the street having fun and playing. But
I've
so
read biographies of people that grew up in New York area, New York City area, and that's the same exact story they tell. Like we catch a bus, like 40 minutes, we go
Mhm.
downtown, or we go uptown, or we go to Manhattan, and we just like mess around for a day, and then we like take the bus back, and get home by dinner, and that's a very different life,
it,
life than mine in Columbus, Ohio suburbs.
when we moved to Texas, we didn't have a car in New York. Well, we did have a car, but like most people just park their cars in a parking garage. Like we lived in an apartment that had a parking garage. And so my family is pretty close knit, and everybody lived very close to each other. And so when we left to come to Texas, all of my aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody we just like we're like pack animals. We just travel in a pack. But we didn't have a car, and so we moved to Texas. And you then in the 70s, you have to have a car in Dallas, Texas. You don't. There's
Mhm.
no public transportation. So this is how old I am. Girls could not wear pants to school in Texas when I got here.
Mhm.
Girls had to wear dresses.
That's
That's that's how old I am. And we had to wear gym suits and all kinds of stuff. And I was not happy. Like I had an accent, a hardcore accent. We stayed at the compound for probably like 6 to 8 months, and then we moved to Dallas area, and then we moved into our own like home house, whatever.
Did it
And
get less intense religious wise?
no, no,
Uh,
no. We went to church all the time. My mom
mm,
she found a church, and we hooked into it. We were always at church. Church was everything. And it was Assembly of God, so it was really very strict. Like we until I was a senior in high school, I can't remember not going to church all the time. And then when I left home when I was a senior, and I never went back to church again.
mm.
So.
So that's an interesting like dichotomy in your childhood. How do you think that it led into that curious, adventurous, fearless nature?
I mean, because I was left alone to do a lot of things. Also, I'm an Aquarius, so I'm gonna go ahead and put that out there. I'm an Aquarius, which is that's just our an Aquarian nature, to be those kind of things and to be like
Mm,
different and apart from the crowd. So I've always been that person. I don't recall being like popular in school. I didn't care to be popular in school, and as an adult, I don't care to be popular either. That's not anything that is important to me. I like to make connections that are based on energy. So, and I feel like I've always felt that way. I always hung around people who were a little different. They weren't the most popular. But then I go to my high school reunions, and everybody remembers a different me than I remember me, because they're like, "Oh, we
Mm,
loved you in high school, and we did this and that." And then I think, "Oh yeah, I did. Maybe I was a little bit more popular than I was." So
mm.
yeah,
Well, were there any entrepreneurs in the family?
no, 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 not at all.
So, not to say that that's unique, but just to be like a first generation entrepreneur, and not only just a first generation entrepreneur, but it seems like you went into it full force at some point. Where does the idea that you can become a business owner start for you?
Okay, so I think this is where it started, because I was thinking about this question earlier while I was getting ready. And it's not really. It could be. This is like probably the launch into my entrepreneurship. So when I was younger, we have a big family and we were poor, and so my parents made me start working at age 14. So they said, "Hey, we got you this job, and it's at this grocery store, and you're going to work here." Or I worked many jobs, and I'll explain that in a second. So they were like, "We got you this job, and you're going to work here." I think it was J.C. Penney at the time, and I was like, "Okay, whatever." They're like, "You have to tell them you're 16, and so you have to have ID and all that kind of crazy shit back then." So I went to work my first job when I was 14, and my parents made me give my paycheck to them. Like, I didn't get to keep the money. The job
Mm,
was so that I could help pay for the family stuff.
mm,
So I was like, man, I really want to have my own money. How do I do this? So I make like a deal with my parents. I'm like, hey, if I get a second job, I'll still make good grades in school. I'll still help with the family, taking care of my brothers and sisters. But I really would like to have some of my own money. So can I get a second job, and can I keep my money for my second job? And my mom said, and dad said, yeah, if you could keep, do all the things that you do, that would be, like, great if you want to have your own money. But really, in, in, at that point, I wanted, because I had not my sister Anne Marie, but my other sister Tammy, who's a little bit younger than me, and my brother Jay. Our parents didn't buy us like clothes, and like we were poor. Like, they used that money to pay for rent and electric,
mhm,
and put gas in the car. And so I always wanted for us to feel normal around all the other kids. And so for
mm,
me, getting this job was the means to us having things that the other normal kids had, but we didn't have. And so
mm,
the job was really to create revenue, to create a life for my brothers and sisters and me that we wouldn't have. And I remember thinking that, like, that was the impetus for me to work, full time at 14 years old, because I was working 20 hours at one job and 20 hours at another job, and then helping take care of my family. And
mm,
I didn't know any different. Like, I didn't know that that's not what everybody else wanted to do. It definitely wasn't. There wasn't a role model that told me to do that, but I didn't know that it was unique, or it was not normal, or like, I didn't realize that at the time. And
mm,
then I'm always, because of my curiosity, I'm always thinking of new ways, because I grew up so poor, to make money. How do I generate revenue? How do I generate revenue? And so
mm,
those were my first few things that I did. I remember the first time, and I was probably like 28. So get out of high school, and then I just worked like regular jobs. Then I decided to go to school to be an accountant, because
mm,
like, I should know how to do accounting if I'm going to be like, if I want to own a business, right? You should do accounting. And so back then, you could, and you still can now, but it was like the beginning of like where you could go to this school, a technical school, and you could just like go to the classroom and get on the computer and do all your work in your own time. And so
mm,
I got my accounting degree, or whatever, program certificate, whatever it was called at the time. I got it in, like, it was supposed to be a year program, and I got it in like 6 months, because I just
mm,
wanted, like, I've always been driven, like, like, I want to beat myself all the time, So I got it in like 6 months, and I got a job working for a CPA, and like, that's what I did for a while. And then I met somebody, and I got married, and but I still like kept my job full time. I did not want to be a stay at home mom at all. And he really wanted me to be a stay at home mom. I didn't want to be one, but um, I finally left my job and I was starting that stay at home mom thing, which was just miserable for me. So I just asked people, can I just do bookkeeping for you? So I got a couple of bookkeeping clients. And then I started, this is crazy. I had a client that did this thing called employee leasing, which is co-employment. You know what I'm talking about, like payroll where you get group benefits. And so everybody's on the same payroll and the ownership is of this one other company. So I started a little employee leasing company. I just started other things so that I could generate revenue. And they were small. And then my kids were playing football and baseball. I have all boys, and they were playing football and baseball. And I was team mom because I always have to be in charge of everything. So here I am, team mom. And I go to the sporting goods store and like it's a mess. Like there's stuff everywhere, piles of pants, shirts. I go get my order, like I'm here for my order. And he's like, oh, well, you're gonna have to come back in 2 days, whatever. And all the team moms are all standing around. Everybody's mad, whatever. So I go home that night to my husband and I say to him, hey, like I didn't get the uniforms because, it was at the stores. I'm going to go ahead and say who it is because they're not even in business anymore. Larry Bob's didn't have, literally, it was called Larry Bob's, did not have our stuff. And so we have to come back next week. And I was like, man, that place was such a wreck. Like if somebody just like a sporting goods store, because I'm always thinking sporting goods store would be such a good idea for somebody to be in competition with him because he's the only one. And
Larry Bob. Oh no, Larry Bob created his competition.
And yes, that's exactly what happened. So I said to my husband that, and he's like, girls don't open sporting goods stores, Joanne. And I said, all right. Next day I woke up, I looked at it. I went back to Larry Bob's. I looked at all of the pants, the shirts. I wrote down all the names of the brands. And I just started reaching out to them and saying, would you sell to me if I wanted to open a sporting goods store? And they were like, yeah, whatever. So I just went and told team moms, hey, if you can't get your pants at Larry Bob's, I can get your pants for you. And that's how it started. And then I did open a sporting goods store and I opened a screen printing and embroidery shop right after that. Like that's what it.
Well, I think you said at the onset that you didn't have any role models, but I think in some ways what you're describing is you had some negative role models in that people didn't necessarily have money. And I think the story you're telling that you felt almost like self-conscious not having money. I've heard that from so many like really successful entrepreneurs that they were like, we were really poor when I was a kid. So I just vowed like, that's never going to be me. And then they just go out and they just hustle and hustle and hustle. And they try to like reinvent the way that their family thinks about money and finances. I mean, that story is definitely really common. So it's interesting the way that you sort of just dip your toe and dip your toe. You're always like interested in it and you just keep going farther and farther and farther and farther. And that's one thing that I've said many times on this podcast, that really the difference between successful entrepreneurs and people who don't ever get their start is this: at some point you just have to commit, just like you did to starting this store. Just like, all right, like screw it, we're gonna do it. Like I don't need to wait anymore. Like Larry Bob's doing it, like, and Larry Bob doesn't look like he's doing a very good job. So like I could probably do it better.
I operate in fear. I've always operated in fear. Fear is a motivator for me. Not fear like I'm afraid of snakes or like a plane crashing. Not that kind of fear. I'm like, once I feel that like energy of fear inside of me, I know that that's the thing that I need to go towards. And there's like a certain dopamine hit. Like I'm an addict because I'm a recovering alcoholic for sure. So there's a certain dopamine hit on, like when I take the risks. So I'm addicted to the risks, I guess is what you could say.
It's interesting how like closely tied fear and excitement are. Like people love scary movies and haunted houses. I don't love scary movies. I've only been to one haunted house.
Really?
But people like were filling a line to this haunted house. It was like a 4-hour wait, and we did it. And I was like, I don't know if that was worth 4 hours of my time. I mean, I'm glad I did it one time, but yeah, it's interesting how people sort of like lean into fear. Like you pay someone else to scare you. That seems like an odd thing, But I've heard that from many entrepreneurs that when they feel that fear, it's almost like a sign like, shit, I have to do this thing. Don't.
I'm in the right place, right time, right direction, And then I always think about this too, and this has just been more in the last, I'm gonna say, since I got sober, everything changed for me in terms of like how I viewed life. And then pre to my sobriety. So I'm gonna go back. Is that okay? To
Yeah,
go back a little bit.
Are we going
Okay,
to the sports store or even before?
No, after the sports store. So then I had it for a few years. Then we wound up getting divorced, and then I got to another relationship, and he was like my partner, and then my kids are playing baseball and football, and so this is so funny. I always love to tell this story because this is my first restaurant, right? So we have a concession stand at our Pee Wee football and baseball field, right?
Got it.
And
As
so
they do. Yep.
and me and my ex, he was the president of the association, right? And he's like, what do you want? Like, you should be on the board also. Cause I love to volunteer. I'm always, if you need a hand, I'm raising my hand to help anybody. And so he said, what do you want to do? And I was like, I always loved food. Always loved food. And watched like Julia Child, PBS, like always watched that kind of stuff when I was growing up. And my parents would buy like this half of a cow every year. And so we'd get all this meat in a freezer, and I'd have to figure out how to cook it because it was like not good cuts of anything. And we didn't have phones back then. We didn't have like you go to the library to go get a cookbook, but I could watch like Jacques Pepin and Julia Child, and I could learn how to cook. And that's how I learned how to cook. So I've always loved food, and I always loved feeding people in community. And, like on Puerto Rico, we have big family meals, like that kind of thing. So when he said, what do you want to do? I said, oh, you know what? I should be the concession director. And we had raised a lot of money in this one. We had like a little shell of a building, and we decided we were going to take this $10,000, which a long time ago, 20, 30 years ago, that was a lot of money, $10,000.
Yeah.
And we're going to build a new concession stand. And so I was like, all right, well, let's do it. So we built this building. We created the kitchen for the building. We created a business model, I would call it, because most like team sport kind of situations, the parents volunteer to come do things all the time. And we said, no, we're not going to make the parents volunteer. They already have to bring their kids. They already have to take all the time off for that. We're just going to pay, because there's lots of young kids that are 14 and 15 that probably would love to earn some money. We're going to pay them to work a shift in our concession stand. So our concession stand was paying people. And we would cook dinner on Monday nights, like meatloaf and mashed potatoes, or we would have like stew on Fridays. I bought my first smoker. I had an assistant that was my pit master, and she was a woman. So it was like literally what I do today 30 years ago, but doing it on this, I didn't get paid for it, but I loved it. I loved that whole thing. I loved seeing the kids work. I loved the parents, like feeling the no pressure of having to come in and like do this volunteer thing that they didn't want to. I loved for us to be creating fun food for everybody. And we wound up having like the designation of the best concession stand. So all of the playoff games were always at our concession stand because we had, we had the best food. Like you want that. So that was like my first foray into that.
Nowadays, you'd be going viral for like this concession stand in
right.
small town in Texas. Oh my gosh, look at this.
It was in Saginaw, Texas. So yeah, it was a small town, Saginaw, Texas. Then I decided. Then I got like really driven after that because me and my ex had started this sporting goods store. I decided to sell it. So I will buy business, or I'll start businesses and then I'll sell them or give them, or like create something for somebody else and wind up making some money off the whole situation. I'm not doing it for free. I'm not going to give people stuff, but so I decided to leave the sporting goods situation. My kids had gotten bigger, and it wasn't like I wanted to move on to something else for me. And so I started working for back then it was Nextel. So it's those radios.
Yeah. Oh, and yeah. So, Nextel. All the farmers had them in town. You had to have that if you were a real farmer.
A real person, period.
In Texas.
But that was back when it was like there was you could only talk to like people who were in your group and whatever. So I started in the very beginning. I'd never been in sales. I had always done numbers, and whatever. But I was like, all these other people are doing this. This looks like fun. I think I could do it too. So I became a salesperson for Nextel, and I was with Nextel for 15 years until they got acquired by, for a long time, until they got acquired by Sprint, and then I left at that point. During that time, I was alcohol had a hold of me. It was, and because I was just always like, I was all the time going, like that glass of wine was like the most important thing for me at the end of the day. And then I went to go work for Nextel, and I was in sales, so I would have to entertain clients. So I was spending a lot of time, like having dinners or happy hours or that kind of thing. I traveled a lot because I won top salesman all the time. Like every year, President's Club, I went to, like Puerto Rico, I went everywhere, Hawaii, wherever the trip was, I went. And so I did that for a long time. And, then I would win like all the awards, but I wasn't competing against the other people that were in the office. It was always for me. Like, how can I be a better me? Like, what's the competition here? How can I? And I was able to make a lot of money in telecom. And that was when everything changed. When I saw that I had the real ability to make real money. And all I had to do was just be me. Because really, that's it. When you're in sales, you're just being you.
It is sort of like a new anchor when you're able to make a significant amount of money, or even you get closer to someone who's making that amount of money. You can just like kind of turn your dial a little bit. Like if your parents, the most they ever made was 30,000, and then you start to spend time around you're like, gosh, if I do great, I'm making 60,000, right? And then you spend some time around someone who makes 300,000, and you're like, I didn't even know this was like possible. I was literally watching a YouTube video today, and they were talking about the economy, and they made some comment about like, $120,000 salary. And then one of the top comments was like, who's making $120,000 out there? And I was like thinking to myself, like, I know a lot of people making $120,000. Like that's great income. Don't get me wrong, but that's not like $10 million. Like, I don't know that people making $10 million a year. That anchor, when you see it, mentally,
you can't go back. You can't go back. Like you just can't go back. You can't. But I'll tell you, I did at one point, but we'll get to that part of the story later.
Well, it's an unfortunate reality that you become now like a comparison, right? Comparison is the thief of joy. And you go, well, now that I know 300 is possible, you start looking at people who are making 300. And there's actually like serious psychological studies about that. They ask people, I think these are like Harvard or Yale or Princeton, one of those big Ivy League schools. They had these kids that were going to graduate, and they put this study to them that was something along the lines of like, what would you rather have? You make $200,000 a year, but all your friends are making like $300,000 or $400,000, or would you rather make $100,000 a year, but all your friends are making $50,000? And like time and time again, people would respond that they would rather make less money so long as it was more than
other people.
So even though their absolute amount of money is like getting sliced in half, they're like, I want to be the wealthiest in my group of friends. Yeah, it's an interesting thing there.
It was at that point too that I also realized that I had to change like my friend group because I needed to surround myself. If I wanted to achieve those higher goals and make more money, I needed to be around people who had that mindset, and I couldn't do it being around like the people that I'd been around before. So it required for me to make new friends and take more risks, a lot for sure. And I had that capability working for Sprint to just, like I could make as much money as I wanted to, as hard as I was willing to work. But me and my ex, we broke up, sold the sporting goods store. I was doing the concession thing. We broke up, and I came to Austin, Texas to work a booth for Sprint at the time at South by Southwest, which is our big, one of our big music festivals. And I'd never been to Austin, never been. And so I had a friend that worked for Motorola, and we were on a team doing this like booth, and we were giving phones, and we were managing this whole thing for, like the people of South by. And I get to Austin and I'm just like, I'm blown away. I'm like, how did I not know this was like, I've been in Saginaw, Texas for the last whatever. How did I not know that there was this super hip town where people were like hippies and they were, unique and they were, artists and there was some really great food. And how did I not know about this? And so I tell my friend, I said, hey, I want to move to Austin. He's like, how are you going to move to Austin? You got this, you're making like bank in Fort Worth, like working for Sprint right now. You got this really good position. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I just want to move to Austin. I'm going to come to Austin. He's like, okay, whatever, like no plan, whatever, to go to Austin. So I go back to Fort Worth and I'm working and me and my boss, we don't have a good relationship and he really wants to hold on to me because I'm his top salesperson. Of course, he's making money based on my money. And so my friend calls me, my Motorola friend calls me like 2 weeks later. And he's like, you won't believe this, but your job in Central Texas in Austin just opened up. The person who does your job is leaving.
Mm.
And I was like, who's the hiring manager? And so he tells me who the hiring manager is. And I go to my manager and say, hey, I want to apply for this job in Austin. He's like, what? What do you mean you want to go to Austin? He's like, yeah, I want to go to Austin. So I get on the phone. I said, I need your permission to at least interview. So he gives me his permission. He's like, I don't really want to lose you, but like I want you to be happy also, which was super, super cool of him after the disconnect that we had. That I talked to the hiring manager. He's like, I want you. And within 1 month, I was in Austin. They paid for my move. They paid for my move. I found a place to live easily. Somebody said had a friend that just had a house that just became available. It was a beautiful, beautiful house. I got to move to Austin and I was there in 30 days.
Things are starting to line up for you. That's amazing.
That's when the manifestations, like I can truly say that was one right there. Like I think the sporting goods store was almost one too. Like, like I didn't, you don't know what manifestations were back then because nobody ever talked about that stuff, but I could make things happen, like if I wanted it, I just had to say it, speak it, and it showed up.
I just had someone on the podcast, and he wrote a book sort of about that. He wrote a book about Mansa Musa, who's historically supposed to be the wealthiest person of all time. And apparently Mansa Musa wrote this like fable, essentially, or like short story parable, I guess you would call it. I think a fable has animals in it, moles 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 in it. A short story that is about, like, it's essentially kind of the story of Aladdin. It's like this kid finds this lamp and rubs the lamp, and the genie comes out and he can get anything he wishes. But my friend, the author, talks about that really what the story is about believing in what you want and feeling it. That's what he said. He said you need to start feeling it like deeply, like because your brain will follow the emotions. And I wasn't so sure. I was like, okay, like this, I can kind of see where you're going. My take on it is always that if you believe it and you want it, you'll start to see those opportunities that have always passed you by, right? Like if you were just like, I just like my life, and you would have you'd have just went to Austin and came home and be like, Austin's a fun city, but then you just don't do anything with it. Whereas once you start to believe I can actually do this, then the opportunity presents and you're ready for it. Something else interesting that you brought up, Scott Galloway, I don't know if you know him, but it made me think that he says there's 2 lifestyle changes you should make if you want to get rich. The first one is get credentialed. The second one is move to a super city like New York, San Francisco, Austin, London, Milan. So he says if you want to become, extremely wealthy, like it's an enormous benefit to you to move to one of these. Miami's probably one of them now. If you can live in a super city, your earning potential is just going to get absolutely ramped up, even doing basically, the same job. Being an accountant in, small town Texas is probably not like being an accountant in Austin, Texas. If you can be in the top 10% of one of those two, I mean, it's clearly obvious which one you'd want to pick and which one is going to pay out better.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. So that's when everything kind of did change. But then I was there for a few years and I missed my family and I missed my oldest son he was living with me at the time, and my oldest son had a lot of mental health issues. He's a real loner, and been hit by a car. So I had gone through this during my concession stand era, where my son, he was 17, and him and his friend were driving home one night. The car broke down, and he got out of the car, and typical, like, you never get out of your car at night because like people don't see you, and he got hit by a car, and it was very, very serious. He was care flighted. He was care flighted to a hospital, and I happened upon his accident, like happened upon it. Not that he called me and said he had an accident or that anything happened. It was like 2 a.m, and he did call me and say, "Hey mom, my car broke down." And then his phone died. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to wait to see if he calls me. And he didn't. And so, like, I said to my partner at the time, "Hey, he hasn't called. Something's happened. Something bad has happened." And he's like, "No, we're just going to look for him. Like, if this is a small town, we know the main roads, like where he would have traveled to go to his friend's house." So we go down the road to go to his friend's house, and I see, it's like Christmas, the lights. There's lights everywhere. And I'm like, that's him. Something's happened to him. My partner said, no, it's not him. And my partner was a firefighter at the time. And so we get up on the accident. I see his car on the left, and I see them like wheeling somebody into the helicopter, the care flight. And so he goes over and talks to the paramedics, and they're like, "Yeah, y'all need to get to the hospital immediately. Like, this is really bad." He got hit by a guy who was driving, who didn't see him, and he just kept driving. And luckily there was a state trooper right behind him who saw the whole thing happen, pulled the guy over and called care flight, called the ambulance, called care flight. So we get to the hospital, and he's in a coma. I talked to him for like maybe 5 minutes, and he slips into a coma, and he's in a coma and in the hospital for a long time. Like 2 weeks, I'm sleeping on a floor at a ICU place because we can only see him every couple of hours, and I'm not going to leave the hospital because I do not want to miss the opportunity to see my son. Like he can be dying. So that's for about 4 months or so. He wakes up and he's in bad shape. Like every bone in his body is broken, and he's got a lot of damage. And so we keep having surgery. So we have 26 surgeries on his leg. And they're like, he's going to have to have it amputated. And so we go into the surgery, the final surgery, because they're going to do the amputation. And they come back out, and they're like, "Hey, we figured out why his leg won't heal. We left a surgical sponge in his leg."
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so I said, "Well, what did you do?" And they said, "We removed it." My sister's an attorney. My other sister, Tammy, is an attorney. And so I didn't say anything, just like, "Okay, y'all finish up. I'll be out here, whatever." I called her immediately, tell her what happened. She's like, "Don't talk to them anymore, and just stop talking to them about anything. Like, just be there, but don't talk to them. Don't give them any information. Let them give you all the information they want to." It was a county hospital. So my son was only able to receive in a settlement $100,000.
Oh.
But it was lifetime medical care from that the medical group. So as the story goes on, that was important, and they forgave his hospital bill, which was about $2 million.
Wow.
So
not to say that makes it all right,
No. And so my son he'd already dabbled in drugs. We caught him smoking weed quite a few times, and like he was different, and we knew that. And the pain medicine that he had to take in order for him to survive, because he had so much nerve damage in his body, and he was never going to be able to have children. The pain medicine that he had to take, and all of the medications he had to take, were very, very strong. And he lived kind of like sleeping all the time. He was on Oxycontin, it was just, he didn't really like his life. And he had always had a propensity to be an addict, and he would drink, and then he's on this medication, and it was a lot. And my son, I don't think that he ever recovered emotionally, mentally. And back 20 years ago, there's no mental health help for something like that. They're just like, oh, we're going to get you better, and here's some medicine.
Mm.
And unfortunately, I had a DWI, and I had it in Austin, as a matter of fact. Um, so, oh, you know what? I skipped over something pretty important. I get to Austin, I go to culinary school.
I was going to ask about that because I saw that you went to
Yeah, I go to culinary school, and that was just, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was the most important thing I've ever done. It was the hardest and most important. But it was school. It was school. I was at school, and working. Like, it was just me being the entrepreneur. Like, I didn't plan on doing anything with culinary school. I didn't want to come out of school being a chef. Like, I was a chef for a football player for a few years, and that was fun. Like, I got to do a lot of cool and exciting things, but then, this thing happens, and I go to, because the drinking is escalating still more and more, and my drinking is pretty bad, and I go to court for my DWI, and then they were like, oh, you're gonna have to come back to Austin. You're gonna have to spend like 3 days in jail. And I have friends in Austin, so they're like, you can just like stay at our house on the Friday before, whatever. So I go to jail, and I'm in jail with people in jail, and I don't know anything about jail, and I'm very nervous, and I had taken a Valium before I got there, because I was like, if I'm going to go to jail, I'm going to be out of it. So I'm in jail, and the second day I go to the church in jail. That was like the first time I'd been back to church in like 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
To go to church in jail, because they make you go to church. And then I come out of there, and we're like just sitting around, people reading books, talking, whatever. And they come in, they're like, hey, we need to see Joanne Irizarry. And it's like a nurse, and I'm like, okay. And I'm like, crap, they found out that I took that Valium, and now I'm in trouble. So anyway, they put me in a golf cart, and they drive me over to the infirmary. And I walk into the infirmary, and the lady has a piece of paper in her hand and has my son's name on it. And I looked at it, and I said, he's dead, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And she said, yes. And I said, okay, how did it happen? And she said, we believe that it's suicide. We haven't had the, like, it just happened. It had just happened like a few hours before. And I said, okay, can I go home? And they were like, judge already signed the paperwork. Your friend's coming to pick you up. I had to stay in Austin that night. I couldn't go home because of he had shot himself. And so they were trying to get the house cleaned up before I got back home and take care of that. So, so I go home the next day, and I'm in a blur, and I don't drink for a few days. And then I plan my son's funeral. And at the time he was 25 when we lost him. So, and the drinking just really escalated really, really bad after that. Really bad. I didn't know how to deal with it. I didn't know how to cope. I wasn't getting any help. I wasn't getting any help at all. Like, like everybody was just like actually placating me, like, oh, you should drink because, like, we can't tell you not to drink. Your son just died. And I was so miserable. And that's the only time in my life that I didn't work. I didn't work for a year. I didn't work for 1 full year. I had money, so I was able to like survive, but I didn't work. And then I just got sick of it. I just got sick of not working. And then I came back to Austin and stayed with my friend that had got me like out of the jail situation, had picked me up. And she was my best friend. And I lived with her for a year, and then I was like, I gotta get a job. And so I went to go work as a personal chef for a family in Austin. And then I had connected with somebody because I would go to AA meetings because I was trying to get sober, but I would never stay sober. And I connected and met somebody who was trying to start a landscaping company. And I'm like, I'll start a landscaping company with you. So
you just can't say no. You can't say no, can you?
I was back on track with those kind of things, but I was still like drinking, and it was still a problem. And I had not gotten any better emotionally about my son's my son's death.
Mm-hmm.
So it took 3 years. I was doing the landscaping thing. I was personal chefing. And then one day I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I've got to get some help. And I decided the day that I was going to quit drinking, and I called because before I had several times where I would go to the hospital trying to detox because I was that far advanced into my alcoholism. And like the doctor would be pretty mad at me because that had happened several times. And I felt like for me at that point, like death was the only escape from all of this, because I couldn't. Nobody said you can get better. Nobody said here's what you do. Like nobody gave me a blueprint, and I didn't have any resources. I didn't know how to deal with this because nobody in my family had gone to rehab. My oldest son had gone to rehab for a little while after he got out of the hospital. But like I didn't know where to turn. And I woke up that day and I called the ambulance, or I called 911, and I said, hey, I'm going to die. And I didn't mean that I was going to kill myself, but I wanted it to sound like that because I wanted them to come pick me up. And so they said, we're on our way, like we'll be there in a few minutes. And they came pick me up and they took me to the hospital. And the same doctor that I had met several times before, he was there. He said, why are you back? And I said, because I don't want to do this anymore. I want to stop. And he said, are you willing to do whatever it takes? And I said, yeah, I am. And he left the room and he came back in and he's like, okay, we're going to get you in rehab. And I said, I don't have any money. I don't have insurance. I don't have a way to pay for rehab. And he said, I already have it taken care of. And so he said, you're going to have to fill out some paperwork, but I already have it taken care of. And you have to do everything that we say. And I said, okay. And so they kept me in detox for 3 or 4 more days. They sent me to a halfway house after that, which was quite an experience because a halfway house is not just for alcoholics. It's for the major crazy. So I had to stay at the halfway house for 2 weeks before they had room for me in the rehab center. I went to the rehab center, was only going to be there for 2 weeks. I wound up staying a full month because I needed to, I came out of there and I never drank again. And here we are, like that was in 2013. 11 years ago.
That's
I walked
amazing.
out and never have had the urge. The obsession was 100% lifted, just like, like I had heard in AA and AA, that it would, when it's right, that's when it'll happen. And I came out and I just did what they told me to do. I just got a job, like I never went to another meeting. I can tell you that. I never ever went to another AA meeting. Stayed sober all this time without it, which is unpopular opinion. But this is where religion comes back in for me, because then I'd always gone to I'd always wanted to at church. I couldn't figure out how everybody else was like having these experiences where they were getting themselves close to God. I could never feel that, right? Like I did, I didn't understand that, like the Jesus that was the picture on the wall, which is what was always preached to me, and that was, like the thing. And then I went to rehab and I came out of rehab and I had a lot of long conversations with myself. And I realized at that point, that was the closest I ever felt to whatever God looked like for me. Like for me, then my spirituality, like, man, it just came on like full force. And I did realize something, which is one of the reasons I never went back to AA again. And is that they tell you in AA that you have to have a higher power. I agree. Everybody should believe in something bigger than themselves, for sure.
I have heard that religion is not just forced on you in AA, but you have to admit that you don't have the power over this, that there's something else that has a higher power over you. Do I kind of have the gist of it?
Yeah. So I came out of it and I thought to myself, logically, I'm like thinking, and I'm saying, wait a second. So I was always taught, that in AA that I had to have a higher power, and that, like somebody else was making me like get me sober, but I fucking did all the work.
I
Like
have heard that it
I
seems to
have
take away some of the personal responsibility that like I don't
I
have
showed up
power over this.
I showed up for everything. I'm the one every day who decides not to have a drink, right? Right? Me, I'm the one. I have done all the work. Why can't I be my own God? Why can't I be my higher power? Why can't I do that? And if they say in the Bible that he's made us in his image, that means I'm God. Like, look at me. I'm in his image. I'm in his image. So this is what God looks like. You're what God looks like. Like we're all what God looks like.
Hmm.
And we can't be a success without like being the power behind ourselves. And so that was the day that I spiritually I realized that what I was looking for in church my whole life growing up, I finally found it. And it was in me. I didn't have to go to church to find it. It was in me. And so now my faith is very strong. Not traditionally, like church strong. I don't go to church at all. But I do have such a like I talk to my higher power all the time, which is me. Like I'm just talking to myself all the time. Like, but I do know that there's a bigger force that's watching out for me, and I am so protected.
Mm, it's fascinating. I love it. It's kind of all the great paradoxes are two-sided. So in
Mhm,
the universe, you are everything and you are nothing, right? So
mhm.
why not? God can be inside you. I absolutely believe and appreciate that. What do you think it was that actually like sounds like you just, not to be cliche, but turned over a new leaf? It was just like one day you're like, I just don't have any desire to drink.
Mhm.
And I know that's difficult because I mean, I think the statistics would indicate most people never get to that point where they just are able to flip a switch and say, I have no desire to actually have this thing any longer.
I have a lot of resilience. Like I wanted to be a success at that. I wanted to not. And then there was so much clarity, like not having alcohol fog my brain. Like, how do I figure out how to really deal with life on life's terms? I was able to deal with my son's death after that and realize that it wasn't my fault he died. Like, because I was in jail, it wasn't my fault that was the day that he pulled the trigger. Like, that's not my fault. And then all of the things that my whole life I had felt like were my fault or whatever, they were just lifted from me when I realized it's not on me, it's on other people. Like the people's reaction to me has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with them. And I can't continue to like save the world. Being the oldest child and my parents, I know you've heard of the word parentified, where I had to take care of them. They did not take care of
Hmm.
me.
Hmm.
I've always been been the parent, I've been the leader, I've always been that person all the time in my whole life. My whole life. It's just like I naturally gravitated towards it. I had the confidence for it. People believed anything I said, and they chose me as their leaders in a lot of situations. And I really did know like what was going on. And I don't know how I know all this stuff, but I believe in reincarnation. So I'm sure that I have lived so many lives that I have gathered so much knowledge from all of my lives that that's what I'm a sum of today.
Mm, I love
So,
it. So where does life take you after this extremely difficult journey that it sounds like you begin to get to the other side of? Obviously a work in progress. I mean, I know alcoholics say it's just like, hey, one day at a time. One of my best friends, his dad is a substance abuse counselor. Quote he says that I'm just like, gosh, that's so good. He goes, hey, you can only live one day at a time.
right.
And that's truth of everything, right?
It's hard for me because I can't. I future trip all the time. It's just inherent in me. I don't know any other way except to future trip. I've gotten so much better about it in the last year though. So I come out of there and I'm going to be an accountant only. I'm not going to be put myself at risk by working in a restaurant or do anything like that. Anywhere where there's alcohol involved, right? So um,
Oh,
I
yeah, okay.
I stayed single because you're supposed to stay single for at least a year. So I stayed single for a year, and
Is
then I
that
met.
really? I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I mean, you should stay single for a while, whatever it is. Like the year was what I was told. So I stayed
What's the
single for a year.
logic? What's the logic on that? That you like
for you to get to know yourself and
find yourself and not just implant on someone else. Yeah.
You need to have that time. So I met someone and he was a chef. And so first rule of thumb, everybody out there, chefs don't date chefs. Chefs should never date other chefs. Okay. Period. End of story. It's like, that's a bad thing.
Why is that? They never end up seeing each other because they're always working?
No. It's just I don't know how to explain it. I'll explain it because we'll get through this part of the story. So I meet this guy. He's a chef. He is, at the time, I was not aware that he was a narcissist, but he was a classic case narcissist as it came out. And so him and I meet, and then we fall in love like immediately. It was love bombing, and then I wasn't ready for it, but I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe I can be, like, just because things like in your past didn't work out doesn't mean that, like something in your future. Like I'm trying to be, like a little bit more optimistic about like that this could work for me. So we start cooking together, and then he's working on a ranch. And so he's a chef on a ranch, and I'm like, like I haven't been to a ranch in a long time since I was at the compound a long time ago, right? Like I didn't really have that experience. So he's like, come to the ranch and you can help me cook. We're, like do dinners and stuff like that. So I go and spend weekends with the ranch and I help cook. And I'm back in like the love of my life is cooking. The most important thing is cooking. And I'm back like right in the thick of it again. But, I'm still doing accounting and stuff. But so he says, like you should come live on the ranch with me. And not ready to do that, but I do it anyway. And then we decided to do this little pop-up dinner at this restaurant that was like out in the boonies that hadn't been open for 10 years because the owners that had had it before, somebody fell sick. And so it's just like, it's been dormant, but it's a fully functional restaurant. And he was like, what do you think? And I was like, like I didn't ever have like I said, I didn't want to own a restaurant. That wasn't in my game plan. I would just want to cook for people. Like owning a restaurant seemed so daunting. But here I am, the person that I am. Oh, how hard can it be? Right? Like, yeah, we should do this little pop-up dinner. So we do this pop-up dinner in the restaurant, and it was magic. I don't know how to explain it any other way. We sold out our space in like 2 days. The food turned out perfect. Everything, like we felt like we had been in this kitchen so many times before, and we'd never been in the kitchen except to cook for that night. And so we leave, and it's such a success. Everybody's like, you guys should do this more often, like both of you chefs, like whatever. And we go home and we talk about it a little bit. We're like, man, do you think, like, could we open a restaurant? And the guy that owned the restaurant before us said, like, I don't, if y'all want to think about like opening this restaurant, I'm down, whatever, we're open to whatever it is. And so we drive by it like a million times because you have to go, when you go into town, you got to drive by it. And him and I both are like, oh, there's the restaurant. Oh, we should have that restaurant. So we decide to start making some talk towards like, what does it look like if we buy this restaurant? Like, and I was working as an accountant. He was working, he didn't make as much money as I did. We decided to put some money aside, and like it was going to happen if we decided to do this. So we talked to them, and they said they wanted whatever it was for it at the time. And that was.
Were you trying to buy the building?
Well, it was a restaurant. It was a restaurant. It was a house behind it, and it was 2 acres of land. So it was in the smoker and all of the equipment in the restaurant, like just buy it exactly as it was. So, I was like, the business, the accountant in me says we should, because it hasn't been open in 5 years. This is a really small town. We don't know, like, if we're going to be a success, like we should do as a lease purchase. Like we could tell them we're interested in leasing it for 1 year at whatever rate it is. And then we'll lock in this price to buy it at the end of the year, but we have to have X amount of money. And then we know that if we have this X amount of money that we'll buy it. If not, then we'll figure out what happens after that. We're just going to do this 1 year.
Smart deal.
I proposed it to them, and they said, yeah, sounds great. Sounds great. So we decide we're going to open this restaurant, and we don't have a barbecue background. Neither him or I have barbecue background at all. Like, he'd done like some stuff. He'd been on MasterChef for a season, and he traveled a lot. He did a bunch of, like, cool things, but we did not have like traditional Texas barbecue. He was from Connecticut, like I grew up in New York. The first time I ate barbecue I was like, 48 years old. Like, it was not like I knew anything. We didn't know anything about barbecue. And we said, what should we do? Because we're both like, we want to zhuzh it up and be like, like fine dining, farm to table, whatever, like whatever everybody else is doing. And I said to him, hey, why don't we just do barbecue? And he's like, you would? And he's like, I'm not really like down for that. Cause he's like this big burly guy with lots of tattoos, a beard, like the typical pitmaster look is what he looked like. And so he did not want to fall into that genre. And I respected that. And I said, well, like, I think we can do it. And he said, all right, let's do barbecue. And we were both like, how hard can it be? How hard can it be?
Oh, no.
So we opened up a barbecue restaurant. We had another pop-up. And at that pop-up, we announced that we were opening the restaurant. And then within 30 days, we had the restaurant open. And we opened on the 4th of July. And and we opened on the 4th of July. And we sold out to 200 people the first day we were open, which was insane in a small town. A lot. It was a lot. And we were just like on cloud nine for sure. And then, then it get down to regular business, and it was like, we're still out in the country. There was a few weather events that happened when we first opened. And we struggled through the first year. It was just him and I. We didn't have any employees or anything. So we were just doing it on our own.
You were cooking and serving?
Yeah.
Whoa. Jeez.
Yes, we were. And then, so Texas Monthly is the magazine in Texas that like runs the show for barbecue. Like, they're the ones that expose everybody and name numbers and give you a ranking and that kind of thing. So we obviously wanted to be in Texas Monthly. In our first year, we wound up being one of the top 10 new places in Texas to eat. And so we were super thrilled. And then business changed. Like, then we started getting, noticed. San Antonio Express, which is another paper on the other side, they named us number 2 in barbecue, which was a huge for us. And then the next year, Texas Monthly named us top 25 places to eat that summer. And so we were doing good. We were doing really good business wise. We were doing great, but me and my partner were not doing great together at all.
Was that, and it was business related, or was it just so much time together, so much work, so much stress?
I mean, it was, there was a certain level of narcissism involved, like that. It was, it wasn't good at all. Like, it was, if you've seen The Bear.
Of course.
I lived that every single day. Like, shit thrown at me and being called names, and, like, it was bad. It was bad. So
you're telling me The Bear was not a comedy?
It was not a comedy.
That's the big
so
comedy.
I just couldn't do it anymore. Like, like I have been able to, especially after like having the resiliency to stop drinking alcohol. If something is not for me, I just can walk away from it. Like, if I can quit alcohol, dude, I can quit anything.
Well, like, at that point, you've reinvented yourself like 3 or 4 times over.
So one day we're in the car, and it was another argument about something. I can't even tell you what it was about. It was like a little thing. And I just said, okay, this is enough. I just can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. And then you're gonna have to figure out, like, we're gonna have to figure out financially how we're gonna have this partnership dissolve, and who gets the restaurant and who doesn't get the restaurant. And then so that went on for a few months, and it was very ugly. It was very, very ugly. It was very ugly. And then there was the breaking point where there was a little bit of the ugliness got so severe that we just had to make a decision. And I said, hey, you know what? I'll take this amount of money and I'll walk away. You can keep the restaurant, which was the hardest thing that I'd done to that point.
Did you want
It's
to
to,
continue with the restaurant?
I did. But now that I look back at it, I see that I wanted it out of spite.
Yeah, the wrong reasons.
And so that wasn't going to be a good plan for me at all. So, I said, I'll take this amount of money. It wasn't that much. But it was enough for me to just feel like, like I could walk away, whatever. And at first he told me no. He said, no, I'm not going to do it. Then he called me back and he's like, my attorney said I should. And I said, okay. By the end of that week, we had the deal done and I walked away and I moved back to Austin again because I had been living in the hill country that whole time. And so I moved back to Austin and became an accountant again. But I was not giving up. Like that wasn't the end for me. That was not the end of my story in the barbecue business, right? But I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't have any plan. Like I was pretty beat because I did really love and care about my partner. And I loved the restaurant. I loved the community. And I had to lose all of that. I had to walk the fuck away from it, like for my own mental health. And I never once drank, never thought about drinking. Like that never even crossed my mind as an option. So I was pretty proud of myself that even in the darkest of days that, like I could still be my own light.
Was there anything that you felt like you traded out? I know a lot of alcoholics will, not to say this was you, but they'll start smoking cigarettes or they'll start like just hammering coffee or something of that. Like, did you feel like you ever had like something you subbed in with?
Yeah. Vans.
Vans?
Vans. I own like 50 pairs of Vans.
That was your addiction.
Yeah.
That's a pretty healthy, tame addiction.
Yeah, I don't like. I wear dresses all the time, and I wear Vans with my dresses. I have on. As a matter of fact, I have on checkered Vans right now. So yeah, Vans became the thing.
Really good friends. He was on the podcast. So, geez, now probably at this point, almost 40 episodes ago, he was into like very hard drugs, and he quit cold turkey, and then he just got addicted to sales. So he started selling for a lawn care company and then eventually started selling in the construction industry. And he was just like mainlining sales, like just loved it. He'd just go all day long. And yeah, it's interesting, to your point, sometimes people just have that personality and they can just kind of shift it from one thing to the next.
I'll tell you what I did become addicted to. I became addicted to becoming the version of myself that I always wanted to be. Like, because I had really hidden myself for the 5 years that I was at the restaurant. Like I became, like that person living in a small town in the country, like listening to country music. That's not my thing. It's not my thing. Like I have purple and blue hair, like I have my nose pierced. I have 28 tattoos. Now, this is what I became afterwards. I got addicted to finding who I was and then just taking all the risks every single time just to say, this feels and sounds like me, so I'm going to do it. And that's really what I became addicted, is kind of to myself,
personal growth. That's something.
And just becoming the version of me that I felt safe and comfortable in my own skin. And I could just be like authentic me, which I had not been for a really long time. That was my new drug, is how authentic can I become? And what does it look like?
Well, that might be a decent place to segue into the mental health page that you run. That's one of the largest on Instagram. I think there's dang near 800,000 followers on that page. When did that come about?
Well, it was right when I left. As a matter of fact, it was right when I left. So my son, all my sons I have 3 sons, and they all have their own brand of mental health issues. Like I said, it comes from, like centuries of my family being that way, right? So my son, that's my youngest son, he decided one day, this is right before COVID started, right? So he's like, Mom, like I try to talk about mental health for men, and he's right now he's 32. And he was, at the time, that was 8 years ago, he was like, nobody, like I try to like talk to my friends and nobody understands, because he has he has a bipolar disorder with a mild case of schizophrenia. So he does have like some severe mental health issues, and he's very aware of them, and he works on them all the time. And so he said that, like nobody, like will listen. I can't get my friends to talk about it. And so he said, I want to like create a page, like a private group on Facebook where people could get together and talk about these kind of things. And he said, would you like, if I do it, will you like put it on your page? Because I know that you're like, you're influential and people listen to you. You like, maybe we can get a bunch of people in this group and we can start the conversation about mental health. This is 8 years ago, right? And so
that's early. That's early in the process.
So I said, yeah, sure. I'm here to support you, whatever that looks like. So I said, what are you going to call the page? And he said, A Safe Place Inside Your Head. And I said, why? And he said, because it's like the only place that feels safe is the place that's inside my head. And which in reality, we all know that it's probably the most unsafe place is being inside your head. So he started this group, and I'm not even joking. Within a week, we had 500 people that were in the group that just like off of Facebook told somebody to tell somebody else who told somebody else. And we just started talking, very vulnerably and about all kinds of things. Like, like I woke up this morning and I'm sad. What could I do to help? Like, what do y'all suggest I do? Like, I take, whatever drug, Lexapro, what are the side effects that you've had? Like, do you ever feel like, you can hear voices in your head? Like, those are the kind of questions people were asking on our page. And we were thrilled because people were really gathering around and becoming community and helping each other, like, and we weren't professionals, like it wasn't that important for us to have professionals be part of the team, because we felt like community where people can feel seen and heard and listened to is almost as good as traditional therapy if you can't get it. What's the next best thing? Is talking to your friends, talking to somebody who's been through the same thing as you before, is just releasing that emotion and getting it out there, because it's so much lighter on the outside than it is on the inside. And so that's why we created a place for people to feel seen and heard. So my son didn't know that much about Instagram, and I had always managed Instagram pages for my businesses. So he said, why don't you start the Instagram page? Like you can be over it. I'm going to be he's going to be the moderator. We got a Discord channel, like we went all in for this thing. And so in the beginning, we were posting like stupid shit, like, like have a nice day, like smiley face, like literally it was just like upbeat content is what we started posting. And it was always somebody else's content because we're not content creators. Back then, we definitely weren't. And so I just had the idea, like, why not, like I'm going to see what other people are posting and, follow other people and see what they're posting. And I just started asking people, hey, is it okay if I repost your stuff? And I'm just going to tell you like how you made me feel when I read what you had to say. And people were just like, yeah, I love that, like back then, like now it's a whole different story. People get mad sometimes if you post their stuff, but we like across the board, we've stayed with that kind of business model or role, like business model we do have 4 or 5 regular people who are part of the team, and they represent different parts of like mental health that will help me to post. So because my son wound up leaving, he got very emotionally involved in the page, in the Instagram page. And during COVID, there's so much rhetoric, and it was a lot, and we grew really fast during COVID. And it was very unmanageable for him to hear people say really mean things to him. And he did not feel like he wanted to be part of it. So he left. And then I just stayed on as the person who runs the page. But I let anybody, if you said to me tomorrow, hey, Joe, can I post on your page? I'll be like, sure, let's do a collab. Like it's not my page. It's everybody's page as far as I'm concerned.
Is there ever a monetary aspect to it?
No, not at all. I won't take any money for posting. I won't do any of that. And it's probably like people are like, you should definitely make money. Like that's my service work right there. Like my sobriety. And it's also for me, it's therapy, because when I post like I always sign my own posts, but it's always somebody else's like their content, but I will say how it affected me. Like, like this is, like I feel like this most days, like I get disconnected and disoriented, like, or, I am, like my ADHD makes me, like not be able to complete tasks or whatever. Like I tell my own personal story within that. And I think that's part of what keeps our page, like, like obviously now there was a lot of bots for a long time. So we've had a lot of fall off, and I don't care. I don't care about the number of our page. What I care about is messages and that the people are responding to them. Like if 2,500 people liked a post, a million, viewed it, like that's more than dollars because we affected somebody. We don't know whose life we saved. And there's been many times I've been told, privately on our page, I was not feeling life today. And I came to your page and I read this one thing and I feel like now I'm okay or whatever, like that happens on the regular. And that's really all that's about. That's it. It's my service work. It's not about money. I can make money other ways.
And I think the paradox is that when you do service work, it makes you feel good.
That's right.
I'm being selfless and I'm giving other people what they need, and that actually makes me feel better. So in some ways you can think of it sort of as a selfish pursuit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that continued on, and then COVID happened, and then because I did start another barbecue concept.
I was going to say maybe you missed the COVID wave with your restaurant, but that doesn't sound to be true.
No, I was glad, like I was like, haha, I left the restaurant and COVID happened. But then I couldn't be out of the restaurant business, and I went to go work for a dear friend of mine. I helped them in the front of the house at a farm to table restaurant, and it was a lot of fun. And during COVID, it was like they needed because everybody else left, the servers all left, and I was an entrepreneur, so I didn't get eligible for any kind of like special money that everybody else was getting because they had been employed. So since I'm not an employee anywhere, so I was able to help them. I started a pop-up barbecue business with a guy that I'd met that had done photos for me during my original restaurant. And he wanted to open a barbecue place, but he just didn't have the money, and he did have the he wanted it. So I said, hey, let's be partners. And then we bought this beautiful trailer. It's called Wanderlust Barbecue. It was great. And then COVID hit, and then we couldn't do anything,
Mm-hmm.
and then we came out of COVID, and it was really tough. And he decided that wasn't for him. And so here I am like, oh, the number 2 time I can't be a success in barbecue. Now what the hell is going to happen for me? So I'm at a friend of mine, I'm at his barbecue trailer because the barbecue community is very, very close knit, right? So I'm at his trailer and I'm like, hey, I don't know how to use this traditional smoker that I bought before. I'd always used this other smoker. It's called an oiler, which is a rotisserie smoker, and it operates different from a standard smoker. And so I wanted him to teach me how to use my smoker because I have a smoker now and a trailer, and I'm here by myself with not experience on how to use it. And so I go and I'm working with him, and some guys come up, and they're from a podcast that they had come out and done a podcast at my restaurant. They're like, Joe, we wanted to come see you at Wanderlust, but we haven't been able to yet. And I was like, don't worry about it, because Wanderlust is not going to happen anymore. And they're like, well, what are you going to do? And literally at that moment, this is what came out of my mouth. I'm not working with boys anymore. I want to find a girl in barbecue. I want to find a young lady who's hungry, who's talented, who's already been doing barbecue before, and I want to invest in her. And they were like, hey, do you know who Barbecue Rat is? And I was like, they were referring to an Instagram name, right? So I'm like, I don't know who that is. They're like, look her up. She's working in Dallas right now and she was working at a restaurant called Goldie's, which is the #1 barbecue place in Texas. And it wasn't #1 then, but she's working at Goldie's and she's trying to get back to Austin. Maybe you guys could connect. And I said, okay. So I went, fearless. I lived my friend's pit that day, and I sent her a message out of nowhere on Instagram. Hey, I've got a smoker. I heard you trying to move back here. Like literally said this, I have this smoker and I would love to invest in you. If you want to get here, maybe we should meet up and talk. She doesn't answer me for like 3 days.
She's probably thinking this lady's crazy.
That's right.
I should probably just let this one go by.
That's right. So then she finally reaches out to me and she said, hey, I've been talking to people and I also noticed that you're a mental health advocate and I would love to, meet up with you. So her and the guy, Johnny from Goldie's, come the next weekend. We sit at my dining room table. I meet Chuck and we connect and it is magic from the moment that we connect. We just looked at each other and said, well, we don't know what this looks like and how we're going to make it work, but let's do it. So we decided to start working towards that. And then Goldie's got within 2 weeks, Goldie's got #1 barbecue place. So then it was like, does Chuck leave Goldie's because she's at the #1, she's the pit master at the #1 barbecue place. Does she really want to leave? And then we start this business and, right now she's #1. And so we have a few pop-ups and they're very well received and she's getting her menu together and then we decided to make it real. I said, well, do you want this smoker? She's like, no, I want a different smoker. And I said, okay, just tell me what you want. We'll get it. So we sold my smoker within like a couple of weeks. And then we're able to buy the smoker that she wanted, which is a smoker we have at bars right now. So, it was a concept like where we didn't know where we were going to be. Like we were kind of just like by the seat of our pants. We thought we were going to have to get a trailer. She was very adamant about being in Lockhart, very adamant because she wanted to show the barbecue community that she was serious about what she was doing. And Lockhart is the barbecue capital of Texas. So why not be there? We are touted as being all women, queer, barbecue place, which is unheard of, right? So we were like, that was our tagline. And one day I'm with my friends and we're like trying to figure out what we're going to do, where we're going to open, if we need to buy a trailer, really figuring it out. And then I'm with my friends at dinner and I said, Chuck wants to be in Lockhart, but I don't know how this is going to work. Like there was no place for us to move into Lockhart that was affordable for us or like what we needed. And then so she calls me, I'm at dinner with my friends and I'm literally just saying this. And she calls me and she's like keys in her hands like this. I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm a Lockhart. Like, what are those keys to? She said, our restaurant. I said, okay, I'll be there in a minute. So I told my friends, I got to leave dinner right now. I'm going to my restaurant in Lockhart. So I get there and a super, super cool guy. His name is Travis Tober. He's big in the restaurant scene in Texas and now in other cities. He gave us a lead on a space that was right next door to one of his bars. And we talked to the guy that night and signed the lease, and the rest is history. We were in Lockhart. It did take us 6 months to get open. We had a little bit of like problems with the city and trying to get, our stuff approved for a smoker and other things. We were looked at very warily when we first decided to open, and then we got so much press because our food is great and we're good people and we work hard, that the community finally did come to love us.
Yeah, recently you were named one of the top 20 best new restaurants in the United States. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Oh, dude. So we've had quite a few things. Like James Beard, last year we were in top 10 new restaurants for James Beard. We made the top 10 finalists. So we were for a new restaurant. We were super excited. Eater, the Nationwide Eater named us top. I think it was top 10 or top. Yeah, it was top 10. And then we've had like Southern Living about a month ago. They named us #2 barbecue in the United States. So we've had a lot of stuff that's happened, and like I can tell you right now that not one of those things had we ever said we wanted.
Mhm.
We never we manifested, Lockhart. We manifested Lockhart, and we just wanted to be some girls making good barbecue, feeding people what we ate, growing up. That's all we wanted to do. We just wanted to have fun. We wanted to have fun, create good food, and be in Lockhart. That's it. The rest of it that happened was out of our hands. So, how does it feel? It feels crazy. But I can also tell you this because, I'm a big manifestor and I believe in a lot of woo woo stuff. Is that my words to most people is that whatever you think you want, go for it. Go for it for sure. Just head down, both feet in, jump in, scared, fear based, whatever. Just go for it. And then watch the magic unfold as what the universe thinks that you should have.
Mm.
I must be a really kick-ass person for the universe to say, that was a nice dream, but that's not enough. Here, let me give you this. Let me give you best restaurant. Let me give you those things, the things I never asked for that I was able to receive.
Well, I think you've been through a long journey to get there. And I know that this is not the end of your story because I know you also, why wouldn't you have another business on the side here?
I do other stuff. I do have other stuff. I have my real estate license. I'm not active in that. I do some stuff on property management, I have some goals. So one of the really coolest things is I had a, really bad relationship with my mom. And when she passed away, I entered culinary school 2 weeks after she passed away. So she never got to see me become a chef. Right.
Mm.
And, my mom was a terrible cook and she thought she was a good cook, but she was a terrible cook. And so, when me and Chuck got together to do barbs, and she's like, I want you to do dessert because that's what I did at my restaurants. I did sides and the dessert. And so, what would you like to do? Because our menu is very specific to the food that we ate growing up, so it's very much very authentic to our culture. And so I said, we went to church all the time, and my mom didn't know how to cook, but she would make pineapple upside down cake out of a box. And that was the thing that she was the most proud of, is this pineapple upside down cake. And it was the only dessert I ever ate growing up. And, that is my core memory of dessert is that. And I would like to take that, what my mom made, because I can do it into a cobbler. I can, I know how to make a recipe. I can do it into a cobbler and, and then it was almost I want to show my mom I could do better than her, but then it was almost in honor of, never having that place where her and I came back together again, that the thing that I would create would be something that reminds me of her. And that would be the thing that's, in my restaurant. And so the irony of the whole thing is the pineapple upside down cobbler is featured in Bon Appetit magazine. So it's full circle for me to actually, have that closure with my mom. Because here's the thing that, will go down in history that I'll be remembered for, is the thing that I created for a person that I had a really hard time with. But I wanted to have that closure with her. And here it is. It's in the magazine. The story is in the magazine. So that is almost as important to me as the restaurant being named, is to be able to say that out loud,
I think your story is an amazing example of turning negative things into positive things. I think you're living that out, seems like, every single day.
So my next venture is I really want to have a cobbler shop.
A cobbler shop.
Yeah, I want to have. So there's a place in Austin. It's called Tiny Pies, and it's little pies, right? So I want to do tiny cobblers. I don't know what that looks like. I'm just putting it out there.
Hey, that you can manifest, you can bring it into reality. I think talking about it and wanting it is step one.
Yeah. I think one thing we haven't talked about that we'll just talk about real quick is that I do these. Part of my sobriety is to like y'all, everybody that's out in your audience lands probably knows that there's like a sober movement going on, and people are like going a little backwards on how much they're drinking. And so 3 years ago, I went to Chicago and I went to this with my friend. We went to this like champagne. It was called Pop. It was a champagne bar. And so I was used to, like everywhere I go, I just get sparkling water because there's like no options for people who drink alcohol. Like, what could you drink? And so there we're having these oysters and this truffle popcorn, and the girl says to me, "Hey, what do you think of everything?" I was like, "It's great, but the only thing that's missing is that, man, I'm a recovering alcoholic, but I sure do wish there was, like, I know there's no such thing, but like there was some champagne for me." Like, and she said, "Hold on," and she goes to the back and she brings a bottle of sparkling lights, which is Leitz brand of rosé, and she pours me a glass. And at first, I'm a little wary about, like, should I try it? Because, like, I said, "Are you sure there's no alcohol in it?" And she's like, "Yeah." I taste it, and it totally brings me back to like the feeling of the calmness and like whatever I felt from the alcohol, but not like it didn't, like, obviously wouldn't get me like drunk or anything. And it just changed everything. Like, I was like joyful and all I could think of was, how do I go back and tell everybody about this? So I started a like to like figure out like who was selling these non-alcoholic brands, and just same thing like I did with the sporting goods store. I started reaching out to them and say, "Can I buy product from you? Can I buy product?" And I started a company called Zero Proof Pop-Up Bottle Shop. And so I do events where I show up and I have non-alcohol or zero proof products. So when people are at an event, if they decide they don't want to drink, there's options for them. So I do that also. I did an event last night. It was super cool because most of the time they ask me to also bring alcohol, which I'm fine with because inclusivity is the most important thing. Like, I don't care if you drink. That's not my thing, but I want to be able to have people who don't want to drink to have an option to not drink, but still have that celebratory experience. And so I usually bring, several bottles of wine. Last night, the event I was at, nobody wanted alcohol. Every single woman in that group, 31 of them, all chose to not drink. It was that, to me, it was like, that's success right there.
Amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. Joe, thank you so much for sharing everything. This was really fun. I'm really appreciative of your time, appreciative of you giving us that story and being an inspiration for a ton of people out there.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for just letting me talk.
Where can people find you? Where can people find the barbecue? Where can people find Pop-Up Shop?
Okay, so it's the Instagram. Just go to Instagram. At Barb's BBQ is the barbecue place. We're in Lockhart, Texas. I would caution, if you're in Texas and you want to come to visit us, because of the Bon Appetit thing, we're super, like, there's lines to get in, and it takes hours sometimes. Sunday is the best day to show up. We're a little bit less busy on a Sunday, so I would say a Sunday is the best day. So it's at Barb's BBQ, BARBS BQ on Instagram, and then Zero Proof Pop-Up Bottle Shop. I know that's a mouthful, but that's how you can reach me on Instagram. And then you could also go to my website. There's like a contact me kind of thing, because I do private events. So if people want for me to show up at a party or an event, I can do that and showcase the non-alcoholic products.
Well, if you're in the Austin Lockhart region, you got to go visit. And Joe, I think maybe I need to make a trip down to Texas when it starts getting
That's right. That's right.
I'll tell him I know the owner.
That's right.
Can I cut the line? Can I cut at least halfway through the line?
Well, I'll make sure you get it. You're coming through the back door like
VIP.
VIP for sure.
That'd be the best I'd ever felt in my whole life.
Oh,
Joe, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. It was great to chat with you.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.